Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, I'm so very happy to be here and host this talk by Vicente Pessoa. Vicente returns to our talk today and will be talking to us about the cures of Jesus, a medical spiritist hypothesis. Before we turn it over to Vicente, I would like to take a moment to do an opening prayer. So let us all close our eyes. Let's take this opportunity to open our hearts, our minds, to the spirits of lights who are here present, along with our benefactors who guide us during our journey on earth. May all of us be blessed. May our dear friend Vicente receive the inspirational during his talk, and may all of us be touched by his words of wisdom. So be it. Vicente, welcome. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you very much, Marcia. It's a pleasure being here with you. And I hope Jesus and our guides inspire us to speak properly and help everybody understand a little bit more about the life of our Master Jesus.
Yes. So before we start, I would like to say to everyone that this is such a relevant topic, right, Vicente? We are going through a pandemic, and it is so important for us to understand healing from that medical spiritist lenses. So thank you so very much, Vicente. And before he begins his very important message, I would like to introduce him for those who do not know him. He is an infectious disease physician and currently the vice president of the Spiritist Medical Association of Goiânia in Brazil. I would like to remind everyone in the audience to please send your questions, your observations during the talk via chat. We will allow time. So once Vicente concludes his presentation, he will address them. So, Vicente, could you please begin? Thank you so very much.
So let's begin our talk. I would like to ask for my slides to be projected. So when we talk about the cures of Jesus, of course, we are going to talk about ideas, reflections, and hypotheses. We have no intention to uh, to say that everything we are going to say here today it's actually what really happened. But we will try to bring ideas, reflections, and construct to build a hypothesis of the way Jesus used to heal people, to cure people, based on science, based on medicine, but also with the help of the words and the work of Allan Kardec and the spirit André Luiz in partnership with Chico Xavier, and try to bring an idea that makes sense, because Spiritism is also a science. And many people ask me, why is this important? The important thing is that Jesus cured people, and he preached about transformation, moral evolution, and that's all that matters. But sometimes we have to go deep inside some scientific aspects of the healing process, the physiological aspects of the healing process, in order to understand better the life of Jesus and his way of curing people, healing people, and bringing along with that physiological phenomenon a teaching, a message. So we understand that this is very important to learn. So this is why we are going to talk about this subject, the cures of Jesus. So I think I can change my slides, right? I can move them on. So let's see the first one. Okay, so I would like to begin with a number, which is a big number, 50 to 7 trillion. It's our number. It's the number we are going to work with. And this number is so big, and sometimes we don't realize how big this number is. So in order for us to realize how big this number is, I wrote the number down. So this is the number. This is the amount of zeros that are behind 50 trillions or 70 trillions. This number is so big and it's so great that if you start to count right now from 0 to 70 trillion, and if you spend only 1 second in each number, and if you don't stop, not even to drink a little coffee or to go to the bathroom, it's going to take you 1,500,000 years to count from 0 to 70 trillion. So you may try if you want. We can stop the video now and wait, but I don't think anybody will try to do it. And what I want to tell you, it's what this number represents. And this number represents the amount of cells of a human body. An adult human body carries around 50 to 70 trillion cells. So your body is made out of this amount of cells. For us to have an idea of how great this number is, how big this number is, our galaxy, the Milky Way, contains 200 billion stars. 200 billion stars. It's not even 1 trillion. The galaxy next door to ours, the Andromeda Galaxy, which is much bigger than our galaxy, contains 400 billion stars, which is not even half a trillion. So we have a lot of cells building up our body. All these cells, all these trillions of cells, they began from an act of love between a male and a female. At least it was supposed to be an act of love. And when this act of love takes place, a phenomenon that we know in embryology takes place. This phenomenon is the deposition, the insertion of the sexual reproductive cells from the male into the female reproductive system. And these cells are called the sperms from the male and the egg from the female. And as soon as the sperms get into the female body, they begin to swim towards the egg. It's a wonderful phenomenon. We can ask so many questions about this. For example, how do they know where they have to go, where the egg is, and why a specific sperm wins the race? Why that specific sperms swim faster than the other ones? And he is the one responsible for getting into the egg and begin a new life, a new body with a unique genetic code. We all know that our 70 trillion cells, they have the same genetic code. They are clones from each other. They are twins, but they have 43 pairs of chromosomes. Where do these chromosomes come from? They come from the sperms and the egg. So the sperms carry 23 pairs of chromosomes, and the female egg carries 23 other pairs of chromosomes. And when they get together, they form a unique cell with 46 pairs of chromosomes. It's worth explaining that the sperms, they are not like they are not all alike. They have small differences between them concerning the genetic code, their genetic potential. So do the eggs. They are not all equal. That's why you are not equal to your sister or your brother unless you are an identical twin. Then you are clones. But if you are not an identical twins, you are different genetically from your brother and your sister. And that difference comes from the small difference that exists between the different sperms and the different eggs. And we can learn about this process in this wonderful book called Missionários da Luz, Missionaries of the Light, written by André Luiz and Chico Xavier. And there on chapter 13, André Luiz will bring us information about the reincarnation of uh, a spirit named Segismundo. And there he will explain us that we inherit trends. We don't carry in our lives a genetical determinism. Of course, we do carry a genetical determinism in the sense that our genes, they do not change. That sequence don't change. But you are not slave of those genes. They can function, they can work in many different ways, gathering many different answers or responses, physiologically speaking. And that's what we are going to learn today in order to understand this genetic potential that we bring with us. And if this was the way, maybe hypothetically, that Jesus performed his cures. So let's move on. So as soon as the sperm reaches the egg, this phenomenon takes place, fertilization. So fertilization is the fusion of haploid gametes. Haploid gametes, it's the name we call the sperm and the egg because they contain half of the number of the chromosomes of our species, 23 each. So a haploid cell is a cell that contains half of the number of the chromosomes of that species. So fertilization is the fusion of haploid gametes, egg and sperm, to form the diploid zygote. So the zygote, our first cell, which brings our genetic identity, it's a diploid cell, a cell with 46 chromosomes. So when the sperm joins the egg and fertilizes it, conception takes place. Life begins at fertilization. So this is what Allan Kardec brings us in the Spirit's book when he asks the spirits this question: when life begins? And the answer is life begins at fertilization, at conception. And this is what science says as well. We at the School of Medicine, we study this book, Human Embryology, by this famous author, Keith Moore, with his an embryologist, and he is very clear there that life begins at fertilization. And any crime against this cell, against this zygote, is a crime against life. From this moment on, life is sacred. So we ought to respect the development of this cell in a human body. We cannot interrupt this process because we would be committing a crime against the laws of life, which is abortion, clearly speaking. So here we have a picture of the zygote, and the first steps this zygote takes to transform itself in a complete human body. So from one cell, it divides itself in 2 cells, then in 4 cells, then in 8 cells, 16 cells, to the point that the amount of cells that we have, we call the blastocyst, as we can see in this picture. Excuse me. So the blastocyst, it was you a few years ago, right? We all were a blastocyst. We all were a zygote a few years ago. And the blastocyst is divided in 2 parts, as you can see in this picture. Look at this picture and take note that how equal those cells are to each other. So they look the same. You cannot differentiate these cells. This is very important for our idea, for our hypothesis. All the cells, they contain the same genetic code, and they look exactly the same. The inner part of the blastocyst we call embryoblast, and those cells will develop in the placenta, in the amniotic fluid, in the umbilical cord, those structures that help the fetus to develop, the embryo to develop. And the outer cells of the blastocyst we call the trophoblast. And the trophoblast will be responsible for the formation of the new human body. Your bone cells, your skin cells, your neurons, your eye cells, your pancreatic cells, your cardiac cells, your muscles, all the cells of your body will come from the trophoblast. So this is the human blastula or blastocyst. It's you right after a few days, a few hours after fertilization, conception took place. And as this process evolves during 9 months in the uterus of your mother, those cells, they become different from each other. So as we can see on the upper left corner of this picture, we see the sperm and the female egg. And after they join together, after they make the zygote with its written ovo right there, it's a unique cell, they begin to divide themselves. And we can see that the first cells that are formed, they are all equal. They are called undifferentiated cells. Why? Because you cannot differentiate one from the other. So they are undifferentiated cells. But as time passes, as time goes by during the 9 months inside the uterus, those cells, they begin to look very different from each other. So this process takes place in utero. So look at the cells outside of this picture. We have a muscle cell, we have a neuron, we have a blood cell, we have a leukocyte, we have many kind of cells. Skin cell, look how different they are. So these cells are, this process is called cellular differentiation. So it's, I hope it was pretty easy to understand that these cells, they are different from each other. In this process, the development of a new human body, we call cellular differentiation. But have you ever wondered how this takes place? If they have the same genetic code, the same DNA, how they present themselves so differently? It's like they are from different people, from different beings. How is that possible? If they have the same DNA, shouldn't they look equal forever, like twins? Why do they take these different formats and shapes and functions? How do that work? Who controls that? So we have to make those questions. How my neuron knows that it has to go to the upper side of my body, inside my brain, and how my bone cell knows that Uh, it has to migrate to my bone, to my leg, to my arm. Who controls that? How can we explain that? So after 9 months, we have what we see in the picture, a new human being. So this is the point. Cells use the same genetic material, the same information, in very different ways. But how do they do that? And why does that happen? That's the question. Those are the questions we should ask. Have you ever thought about that? That all your cells are clones from each other, but they look so different, they work so different? What's the explanation? So, in order to understand that, I bring you this concept, which is studied in epigenetic, which it's a science that tries to understand genetic from the outside, not from the genes point of view, but it tries to understand outside factors that influence our genes. For example, diet, exercise, toxic substances, and why not, thoughts. Why not? So, uh, this landscape is represented by this small sphere that it's located on the upside of a hill. And this small sphere represents the zygote. It's our first cell after conception, after fertilization. It's the zygote. So if you drop a sphere down a hill, what will happen with this sphere? The sphere will go downhill because the sphere is subject to a law, a physics law called gravity. The sphere cannot go uphill. The sphere should go downhill. And while the sphere goes downhill, what dictates which way the sphere will go? Those tiny imperfections on the ground, the wind, the rain, the temperature, the sphere's mass, all these factors together will influence if the sphere will go right or left. So, what does this represent for us? If the sphere is the zygote, when the sphere gets downhill, what does that mean? It means a complete differentiated cell. So, each corner located downhill is a different cell. So, here we have the representation of our zygote transforming itself in a neuron, in a bone cell, in a cardiological cell, in a pancreatic cell, depending the way it takes during his trip downhill. So, looking at this picture, we can see that the blue sphere is already a skin cell, a neuron, a very specialized cell. And because of the law of gravity, this sphere cannot go back and transform itself in a zygote or in a undifferentiated cell, which we call stem cell, that has the power to transform itself in any other cell. It's the stem cell, undifferentiated cell. So the sphere cannot go up because gravity does not allow that. So after we are formed, after our cells are already specialized, they cannot go back and transform themselves in stem cells anymore. Right? Is that right? Does that make sense? Or not? Or is it possible? What can we do to make this sphere go back uphill? The sphere can go back uphill if we apply a force on the sphere, a force that is stronger than gravity. So this force will win, will prevail over gravity, and then we can bring the sphere back. Can we do that in our body? Can we apply a force in our cells that is able to transform a neuron in a stem cell, your pancreatic cell in a stem cell, and maybe can we have a cutaway transform directly a neuron in a skin cell without going back, without transforming this neuron in a stem cell? Can we do that from uh, the position the blue sphere is right to the other position on the other side? Can we do that? So that would be very interesting if we could that, if we could reverse the differentiation process in our body. That would be amazing, with many, many important consequences. So I hope my English is okay so far, and I hope I could explain these concepts because we will need them. So this is the hard part of the speech. We are getting over it, and we are getting into spiritism pretty soon. So hang in there with me. I think it's going to be worth it. So this is the question I just made. What if it was possible to go backwards and revert this process? So bring a very specialized cells back to its state as a stem cell, a cell that could differentiate in another cell. So in other words, can I take my neuron, transform it in a stem cell, and then transform that stem cell in a pancreatic cell right from my neuron? Is that possible? So that would be amazing. So I present to you Professor John Gurdon. He is British, and when he was a child, his science teacher told his parents, I believe Gurdon has plans of becoming a scientist. So far, I consider it ridiculous. So, Gurdon was what we call a genius, which is somebody that see what others saw, but think what nobody has thought yet about that view. So this is what he did. He looked at a phenomenon that everybody looked before, but he thought, and he had an idea that nobody else did. So his question was, his goal was to answer the following question: if all the cells of an adult contains all the original set of genes, is that true? I've been saying this from the beginning. All our cells have the same genetic material. They are clones from each other, and yet they look so different from each other. So he wanted to answer this question. Is that true? Our cells have the same set of genes. Are they identical twins? Or during the process of differentiation, they lost or they inactivated part of those genes during this process in a irreversible way forever. So my neuron, he cut off some genes in order to transform himself in neuron, and that's why he is not able to transport oxygen, because he does not bring the oxygen transport gene in it. But my blood cells do. But they cannot conduct electricity like the neuron do. So my blood cell cut this part of the genome and throw it away, or are they actually true? Is it actually true that they have the same set of genes, but some of them are inactivated? So that's why the cells work differently. Isn't it interesting? So he elaborated an experiment to answer this question. And he published his experiment in 1962. What he did was, he took a frog, a female frog, which he called frog A, as we can see in this picture, and he took the egg of this female frog, and he destroyed the nucleus. And we all know that it's in the nucleus that our genome is, right? So he destroyed with radiation the nucleus. What was left? A cell with a membrane and no nucleus, only the cytoplasm. So he took this cell with no nucleus, and he took a frog B, a second frog, and he took a fully differentiated cell from the skin of that frog. So follow my thought. If this cell is fully differentiated, maybe this cell had to cut off some genes in order to be a skin cell, right? Or maybe not. Maybe this cell have the complete set of genes of a frog, and some of those genes are inactivated. That's what he wanted to answer. So he took the nucleus out of this completely specialized cell, and he put this nucleus in the cytoplasm of the cell of the first frog. So what he was trying to prove, if those cells had lost some sets of genes, when this new cell reproduced, it would form only skin cells. That's all these cells could be able to be, skin cell. This new cell did not bring in it all the genes, all the DNA able to form a complete frog with all its organs. So, for his surprise, when this cell began to divide itself, it transformed in a new, complete frog clone of frog B. This experiment proved that even our specialized cells brings inside their nucleus the whole set of genes. They are in fact all clones of each other. But some genes are inactivated in some of our cells. They are sleeping. They are turned off. So, this was amazing for that time, 1962. So time passes by, and after that, Dr. Shinya Yamanaka, as we see him in this picture from the University of Tokyo in Japan, he did the same process. He was searching, he was trying to create stem cells from differentiated or specialized cells. But he used a different method. He did not transplant a nucleus from one cell to the other, like John Gurdon did. He suspected that we had a set of genes that, if they were turned on a specific cell, they could bring the cell back to a stem cell state. They could push the sphere up the landscape, the hill that we just explained. So he began with 24 likely candidate genes. And after a very hard work, he concluded that we all bring in ourselves 4 genes that, if they are turned on, they can transform any cell in our body in a stem cell, in a IPS, pluripotent stem cells inducible pluripotent stem cell. So That was amazing. He did exactly what John Gurdon did with without nucleus transferring. And because of that, both of them were able to prove that the differentiation process that form a human body can be reversed. So, what are the consequences of this for medicine, for our health? Imagine that you have a pancreatic cancer. And imagine that I can take your pancreatic cells and transform them in pluripotent cell, in a stem cell. And then I can bring them back inside to you, healthy, healthy new cells. Imagine that you had a myocardial infarction, a necrosis in your heart, and I can take cells from your skin, transform them in stem cells, and after that, transform them in heart cells and inject them in your heart so they can substitute the necrotic tissue in your heart can work again without rejection. Imagine that for people who had medullary trauma. They can't walk, they can't move. Imagine if you take some skin cells, transform them in neurons, and build a connection again so they can move again. So imagine how many applications, how many uses we can do with that information, with that possibility. And because of that, because they reversed this process of cellular differentiation, John Gurdon and Shinya Yamanaka were winners of Nobel Prize of Medicine in 2012. So today, those cells that Yamanaka were able to, to create, they are used for research in many different aspects of medicine. So this is the difficult part. So if you are following me so far, I am very happy. And now I can also relax because the most difficult part is gone. And we are going to talk about Jesus, Spiritism, and something that we are more familiar with. We don't need to be a doctor or a physician to understand Jesus. And we are going to try to construct an idea, to build an idea of Jesus using all these mechanisms to uh, elaborate an hypothesis of how Jesus cured people. I hope you are following me. So let's keep going because we have little time, right? As far as I'm concerned, we have little time. So Jesus was a superior spirit, a very elevated spirit, a spirit that irradiated a lot of light, the most, the greatest spirit that ever stepped on our planet. He is our governor. He was present, he was already perfect and present when Earth was created 4.5 billion years ago. He was one of the coordinators, maybe the coordinator in chief of our planet, as Emmanuel teaches us in the book A Caminho da Luz, which I do not know how to translate. The way of light, the path of light, maybe. So, this is the information Emmanuel brings us. So, where this superiority of Jesus came from? The superiority of Jesus over other humans was not linked to the particularities of his body, but to those of his spirit, which dominated matter completely, and that of his perispirit, which was drawn from the most quintessential portion of Earth's fluids. That's information we found in Genesis from Allan Kardec, chapter 15. So the superiority of Jesus was concerned, was related, was linked to the superiority of his spirit, not his body. The quality of these fluids endowed him with an immense magnetic power, seconded by his incessant desire to do good. So he was superior, and he had this great, gigantic magnetic power, seconded by his desire to do good all the time. That's the difference between Jesus and us. Besides that, Jesus had a second sight, and he possessed it to a high degree. And one could say that it was his normal state, to which a large number of acts during his life attest, and which today have been explained by magnetic phenomena and spiritism. So Jesus was able to see the spiritual world all the time, continuously. This is what we call a second sight. So it was impossible to wear a mask in front of Jesus. He would see your true being, who you really are, what you really did, your past, your potential, your future. There were no space for masks. He could see everything. Your moral condition as well. So, did he act as a medium in the healings he performed? Could he be considered a powerful healing medium? And what Allan Kardec teaches us in Genesis is no, he was not a medium, because a medium is an intermediary, an instrument that discarnate spirits use. Christ, however, had no need of assistance. He was the one who assisted others. Therefore, he acted by himself in virtue of his own personal power, just as incarnates can do in certain cases and according to the measures of their abilities. Here, Allan Kardec is referring to all of us. We all could do that in theory, according to the measure of our abilities. But we are not here to compare our abilities to Jesus' abilities, because his abilities were much greater than ours. So this is why he was able to cure in many different ways. So Jesus cured using his words, using his thoughts, using his hands, using saliva, using mud. He cured from distance. He cured in any way you could imagine. In the Gospel of John, John tells us that many other things Jesus did that they are not written in the Gospels. And the amount of books in the earth is not able to fit how many spectacular and wonderful things Jesus did during his stage with us on planet Earth. What we know in the Gospels is a tiny fraction of this amazing Spirit did while with us on Earth. So let's try to understand a little bit about the physics of the process. André Luiz brings us this information in chapter 4 of Mechanisms of Mediumship. There he tells that spirits that are part of angelic legions, perfect spirits, like Jesus and higher, when they think, they emit super ultra short waves. So, as we can see in the picture above, shorter waves are waves similar to X-ray and gamma ray. They are shorter, they travel faster in space, and they can penetrate matter deeply. They have this high power of matter penetration. If we are not an angel, if we are normal spirits, our waves are slow. They are larger. They are not short. They are larger They travel in space very slowly, and they cannot penetrate matter very deeply. This is a thought that André Luiz brings us, and is a thought that physics tells us when we study waves, the behavior of waves. So this is what happened with Bruce Banner when he transformed in the Incredible Hulk. He had an accident with gamma ray, deep penetration in matter. So gamma rays penetrated deep inside his cells, deep inside the nucleus, and caused mutations. That's why he transformed himself in the Incredible Hulk. It's a mutant because of the deep capability of the gamma rays to penetrate deep inside cells. And this is what André Luiz is telling us, that very evoluted spirits, angelic spirits, emit very short waves, very fast waves, waves able to penetrate deep inside ourselves. And Jesus is a spirit like that. So let's follow, let's keep going. Since these fluids are the vehicle of thought, the fluids around us are the vehicle for thought, we can modify the properties. Our thoughts can modify the properties of these fluids. It is obvious that they must be impregnated with the good or evil qualities of the thoughts that set them in motion, and they change according to the purity or impurity of sentiments. And now we ask a question: what kind of sentiments came out from Jesus? We already saw a great desire to do good, a great love. So these fluids around Jesus, moving very fast because of his brain waves, were impregnated with love, with a great desire to do good, much greater than ours. So, to think is to create. That's what Emmanuel teaches us. Let's keep going. Since the perispirit of incarnates is of nature identical to the spiritual fluids around us, it assimilates them easily, like a sponge soaking up liquid. Allan Kardec, Genesis chapter 14, the fluids. So, suppose you are a person next to Jesus, very close to Jesus. You are under the influence of the fluids, which are under influence of Jesus' thoughts. We are getting there. We are getting close to the final explanation. And your perispirit is able to assimilate those fluids because your perispirit is made of the same characteristics of those fluids. Let's keep going. As the fluids act upon the perispirit, it in turn reacts upon the physical organism with which it is in molecular contact. So the perispirit is in molecular contact with our cells, our body. And if your perispirit assimilates those fluids, it will transfer that fluid, that influence into our cells. This is what Allan Kardec teaches us. So, the healing occurs by replacing an unhealthy molecule with a healthy one. The curative power is thus a direct result of the purity of the injected substance. So Jesus injected a very pure substance. We are not able to do that. That's why we don't cure people, because we don't love enough. Or we cure very slowly in the Spiritist center with weeks, months of imposing hands, because our waves, the waves we emit, the waves we project, cannot penetrate deep in the cell. and cannot substitute the the unhealthy molecule for the healthy one. Cannot do that by acting in our genome. But maybe Jesus' thoughts could act in our genome and correct the defect, correct the error. And from that moment on, with his thought, those cells were able to synthesize the correct proteins and establish health again in that organism. So it also depends on the energy of the will, which causes a more abundant fluidic emission and gives the fluid a greater penetrating power. So what if Jesus was a geneticist or a epigeneticist? He is a perfect spirit. He knows all the laws. He created our planet. He manipulates matter. So he knows the laws of gods, the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of biology. He knew everything. So what if with his thoughts he could act in the genomes of those people, correcting them? So those cells will generate healthy proteins and reestablish the function that was lost, the sight, the paralysis, the damaged tissue by leprosy. So that's an hypothesis that makes sense with genetic, with what Spiritism brings us. It's rational, it's logic. So we bring some geneticists that work in this way. And I recommend this book, The Divine Code of Life, written by Kazuo Murakami, which is a geneticist by the University of Kyoto. And what he writes is, our genes are not immutable, but they change in response to several environmental factors. We first identified the specific genes that are activated by laughter, proving for the first time that positive emotions can trigger the genetic button by an on and off mechanism. So our mood can influence our genes, turning them on and off. So if you're grumpy, if we don't forgive, if you have hate in your heart, you can turn on a bad gene, for example, a cancer gene. But if you are happy, if you are a light person, if you have optimism, you can turn on a good gene, a protective gene, or turn off a bad gene. That's what he's saying. This level of organization is unlikely to occur by mere coincidence. There must be something greater that is responsible for the harmony in the world. Some speak of God, but as a scientist, I prefer to call it something greater. And I am very aware of its existence. I am working on a project that aims to prove the hypothesis that happiness, joy, inspiration, gratitude, and prayer can activate the beneficial genes. I find this amazing, unbelievable. It's science converging with André Luiz, with Spiritism. You will be able to explain the teachings of Buddha and Christ, describing them as mechanisms of genetic activation and deactivation. So this is a scientist saying that maybe Jesus cured by a mechanism of genetic activation or deactivation, using his thought, his mental waves, able to penetrate deep in our cells, transforming them in other cells, pushing the sphere up to a pluripotent cells, and then after that, transforming them in healthy cell, reestablishing function, reestablishing physiology instantaneously, because these fluids, these thoughts are impregnated with much love. This is the hypothesis. This is the theory. And I bring this picture of this very ugly Brazilian actor. Of course, I am joking, He's a very beautiful and handsome young man who had cancer. And because he was so afraid, so anxious, he activated some genes that made him gray. Because we all bring in our genes, in our cells, a gene that will sooner or later be activated and our hair will go gray. But this proves that stress, fear, anxiety can activate that gene earlier than it was supposed to be activated. And after he was cured, he made a treatment, his hair came back to black again. So he deactivated the gene. How? With his emotions, with his thoughts. And that happens all the time in our life with other genes, with other diseases, with other consequences. So this is why when this woman touched Jesus, he got so much fluids inside her from him. He transferred so much good things, so much good intent, good desire to do good, that her bleeding was immediately stopped after 11 years. And that's why this man had his eye cells reestablished when Jesus touched his eyes and told him and told the lady to go and sin no more. Rise and walk. Make an effort to be a better person. Make an effort to have better thoughts, because it would not help if I cure your body and you still keep the same thoughts. You don't change, you don't evolve, because your thoughts will act in your cells, in your genes, bringing disease again. So here we find the connection between moral health and organic health. This is the greater teaching, the teaching that Jesus showed us that we can have a healthy body, but most importantly, we should aim to have a healthy spirit with healthy thoughts. They are connected. That's the greater message. Each patient takes his own doctor inside himself. This patient comes to us without knowing this truth. The best thing we do is give the doctor who resides inside the patient the chance to work. This is so true. The gospel teaches us that. Spiritism confirms that, and science confirms that again, and they are all together. This is why Emmanuel, in this book, Thought and Life, I think that's the correct translation. Let us not forget, therefore, that only the right feelings can outline the right thoughts, without which the soul becomes ill due to the lack of inner balance, imprinting on the somatic apparatus the deviations and disturbances that result from them. So, this is the hypothesis, the ideas, and the reflections I would like to bring us today. I hope I made myself clear. I hope you all could understand the message and that this is a hypothesis. And we think this hypothesis has strong support from science, from Spiritism, and from André Luiz. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you. And I will wait for further questions if they come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vicente. This has been very inspirational talk to me. I know very heavy on the mechanics of our body, right? So thank you for giving us that. But I wanted to take this moment to Thank you. Thanks everyone who's been here, right? And let's go ahead and talk about our questions. Let's see if there's any questions. And Kirsten, hi, Kirsten. She mentioned some cells can be turned on. Can they be turned off with a pill per se? Or would it require using some extrinsic factors that turn it on to also turn it off?
Well, that's a very good question, and I had the answer for that in my slides, but I skipped that slide because lack of time. But I will bring it back if it's possible. And the slide is, let me find it here. It's this slide here. Uh, this one, this one here. I did not show it, but a pill can turn the genes on and off, and that's how medications work. For example, if you are in pain and you take a Tylenol and you take some medication, how do they work? Why your pain goes away? Because Tylenol is represented, for Tylenol, for example, is represented by the yellow dots. So when you take the medication uh, contacts, attaches itself with a receptor in the membrane of your cell, as we can see there, the pink receptor. And after that contact, this receptor changes from the inside of the cell, the inside side of the receptor, which is in the cytoplasm, changes conformation, as we can see in the picture, generating what we call second messengers. These second messengers, they go deep in the nucleus, turning on and off genes. So we have a response to that medication, right? Right? To that drug. That's how drugs work. All kinds of drugs. In order to exert their function, they have to attach to a receptor, change the conformation of that receptor, generate a intracellular response which will affect our genes turning on and off. So pills that you take for treating any kind of disease, they act like that. So the point is, can we activate those receptors with our thoughts? We are with our mental waves. Are those receptors sensitive to vibration, to mental waves, to prayer? When we pray, we generate mental waves. André Luiz teaches us that. And if we pray with deep love, in deep pain, with a lot of emotion, we can create short waves that can act in those receptors, causing the same response that a pill or a medication could cause. This is well explained in the book by Dr. Bruce Lipton, a biologist. And this book is called Biology of Belief. And he defends these ideas. He supports these ideas that our thoughts are able to act on those cellular receptors. Those cellular receptors, they work as big antennas, big receptors for our thoughts. So we can do that taking outside medications. That's possible, of course. That's how medicine and treatments are based on. But we could do that with our thoughts if they are good enough, if they are pure enough. Maybe it's too early for us on Earth yet, but maybe people from other worlds, uh, spirits, more evolved spirits that understands this better, that loves much more than we do, are able to do that. So that's a very good question, and I hope I had answered it.
Sorry, I was on mute. Let's see if we have another question. So Daniel Santos said, Jesus often referred to us having the same power to heal as he did. In your opinion, how can we use these abilities for our own self healing? Thank you, Daniel.
I see no other way than following Jesus' teachings in the gospel in our daily life. But I really mean it. We cannot stay on the surface. We have to go deep, dive deep, and live that message. We have to live that in the tiny aspects of our lives, since, correcting, from driving in the streets when somebody is aggressive behind you or in front of you, through our family members that are difficult, the accidents that life brings to our life. For example, a very violent crime against us, against a family member, a very difficult disease, a very painful disease. We have to leave this message. We have to understand that the great book of medicine, the greatest book of medicine ever written, is Jesus' way of life. From the moment to understand that, and we don't take that as a joke or as a story for children to sleep, uh, we will grow as a spirit, and we will get a great command or get greater control of our body in ourselves. Talk to yourselves, love yourselves, support yourselves using Jesus' gospel. I have no doubt as a physician that Jesus' message is the greatest teachings we have in medicine. The moment we understand that and we live that for true, but for true, every moment of our life, we will have a great jump in medicine and in health, and this planet will be transformed in a much better place to live. So that's what I believe, and I think that's the answer I have for that question.
Mm, thank you so much. Let's see if we have another one. Yes, we do. So, Luis Leon, thank you, Luis. He's sending his message through another channel, and he's asking, is it a reasonable hypothesis that the perispirit of an incarnated is tied and matched cell by cell with his physical body? Could you share any supporting reference to that?
Yes, I believe in that. That's what we learn when we study Spiritism theory. And Allan Kardec brings this teaching in his book Genesis, which I showed in the slides, that our cells are attached to, our perispirit is attached to our cells molecule by molecule. And André Luiz brings that teaching as well, if I am not mistaken, in the book Evolution in Two Worlds. I don't remember by heart right now the chapter, but this information is there, and that information brings us some consequences, because our body can affect our perispirit, and our perispirit can affect our body. That's why we have to take care of our body, because if we don't, when we die, when we separate our perispirit from our body, our perispirit will bring sequels. Is that right? Sequelas, sequels, scars from our life. For example, people who smoke, they intoxicate their perispirit in many different ways. So it's not easy for them when they incarnate. They have to go through different treatments and to recover the perispirit, and that brings consequences for future lives as well. If you have some injuries to your perispirit, it will reflect in your new body, in the new life, because perispirit is responsible for conducting the formation of the new body. The spirit uses its thought when the spirit is able to do so, when he is lucid enough to do
Hmm.
so. But when he's not, he gets help from engineers, spiritual engineers, as we learn in Missionaries of the Light. But if the mold, if the basis is not good enough, which is our spirit, the formation of the body can be compromised. So it's uh, it's a path of two ways. The body can affect the perispirit, and the perispirit can affect the body. So we have to take care of our body, exercising, eating well, not smoking, and we have to take care of our perispirit, having good thoughts, learning how to forgive, learning how to have people, how to love, and how to live a good life.
Love the idea of this two-way street, right, Vicente?
Yes.
So Kirsten sent another question. Thank you so much, Kirsten. In your opinion, Vicente, why aren't mainstream doctors teaching patients this information? If it's scientifically proven to help people, could it be that the big pharmaceutical companies don't want to lose money?
Well, I am not sure if the pharmaceutical company's theory is correct all the way, because I have many fellow physicians and doctors that they do not believe in this, but they are not sold out to the pharmaceutical companies. They are good people. They are trying to do their best according to what they know. I don't believe that physicians. Of course, we always have one or other that is sold to the pharmaceutical industry and have other desires and interests. It happens in every area of a world of proofs and expiations, right? Proofs and is there expiations? I'm not sure the word in English, but you got the point. Uh, it's part of our world, but I believe that most physicians are well intentioned, and if they don't teach that and they don't apply that in their daily basis, it's because they don't know it. They don't have access to that information, or if they do, they don't believe it because they are very materialistic. They don't believe in God, in spirits, and so on. And uh, could you project the question again? Uh, she used a word that I would like to comment. Oh, yeah, I remember. And there is two questions in the Spirit's book, which I believe is question number 149, that Allan Kardec asks exactly that. That when physicians start to studying human body and physiology, they should be amazed by how great the body is, and that would bring the idea of God, that they could not explain that without God. But the opposite happens. They become more materialistic. Why? Allan Kardec asks this question. And the answer is because the human being on planet Earth is very uh, pride, proud, and selfish. And they think they know more than God knows. And by the time they learn that God is much greater than them, and by the time they transform themselves in order to fight pride, prejudice, vanity, they will see in the human body a work of art, a work of God, and they cannot explain everything. There must be a creator. So unfortunately for us, we live in a world where people have this pride, and they don't believe in the spiritual world. So somebody here, Luis Leon, is telling me that it's the question 147. So I am mistaken by two. I said 149. So the question is there, and that's the answer. That's the answer. Uh, Camille Flammarion, which was a scientist in France, we were talking about him. He also believed that. I will show you a picture later of him saying that, but he also believed in that.
So we have one more from Daniel. Thank you, Daniel. Jesus restored the year of the soldier after Peter's swords episode. What do you think happened there?
That's the second time people make me this question, and I still don't have the answer. I can't explain this one, Daniel, my friend. Maybe Jesus had glue in his hand or something like that, but I can't explain that one with the hypothesis I made. But there ought to be an explanation. Jesus himself said that he was not here to break the laws, not even the laws of the Roman Empire, much worse, the laws of nature. He had to accomplish, to follow the laws of biology, the laws of chemistry, the laws of physics, the moral laws, in order to bring strength to his theories, to his ideas, to his message. He could not be mistaken in anything. So there must be an explanation, and it must involve the fluids, perispirit, and something like that. But I confess that I cannot explain that one with a more detailed hypothesis. Something to study more,
More to come.
more to come. Yeah.
So, Kirsten, thank you again, Kirsten, for your insightful question. So, Kirsten asks us, how can we teach people about Jesus without telling them it's Jesus for those who have something against Jesus?
Well, we don't have to tell them it's Jesus. Jesus' message is universal. It's useful here on Earth and in the other side of the galaxy. It's the same message. You can call it anything you want. You can call it good. You can call, if what if Jesus was not called Jesus, was called Vicente? It would be Vicentism, right? So it doesn't matter the name. Uh, we ought to spread the message of good, the
Yes.
message of love. That's what Jesus preached. And many others from other religions. Mother Teresa in the Catholic Church, Saint Francis, Gandhi, uh, Chico Xavier, they are all bringing Jesus' message, no matter what religion. So, what we have to show people that are in constant conflict is this message: forgive, the importance of forgiveness,
Hmm.
how great forgiveness is, how good forgiveness is for you, for the world, how important is to live in peace, how important is to not go for confrontations which will only bring blood, war, and fights and deaths. So it doesn't matter. If you find somebody who doesn't believe in Jesus, bring the message of love and give it no name. It's love's message. So that's the way we should follow, right? And that's the most important thing. Chico Xavier had a very important comment on that when we are concerned about exclusiveness of a religion. He
Hmm.
said, "Thank God," Allan Kardec said, "out of charity there is no salvation." He didn't say out of spiritism there is no salvation. He didn't say out of any religion there is no salvation. He said out of charity there is no salvation. And it's universal. It's we can apply it everywhere for all religions in the whole universe, in other planets, and so on. So I think that's the way. And I think that's what you should do.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think we're coming to an end, and we have many messages of thanks to you, Vicente. And I just want us all to learn from Jesus's messages of love and the importance of forgiveness so that we can indeed ensure our moral and physical health. I want to take this moment, Vicente, to thank you, to thank everyone who's been able to watch this live talk today, and those who have been following our weekly talks. For those, next Saturday, which will be March 20th, at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Please don't miss Luis Lima. And he will be speaking about the power of thoughts. Vicente, before we close the live, can you please say a prayer?
Okay. So let's close our eyes, those who feel comfortable with the eyes closed. And let's think of our Master Jesus waiting for us, bringing us in a very big hug, full of love, full of peace, supporting us, inspiring us, and giving us the courage to follow his teachings. We must have this courage in order to transform ourselves, in order to fight the good fight, to fight the shadows that still grow inside us. Let's ask him to be strong enough not to fall on temptation of lying, of being aggressive, of do not forgiving people. Leave his message. And may his peace invade the heart of the whole humanity, and so be it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone. I hope everyone have a great weekend and keep safe. Thanks.